Well, if you have your Bibles with you, please turn to the Gospel of Matthew. As we continue on, we're in Matthew chapter 6 still, the Sermon on the Mount. We are now at verse 19. We've kind of come to an end of a block that Jesus has been teaching on as he speaks about God, the Father, who sees what is done in secret. And yet there's still a related theme as we carry on now. In verse 19, of course, the whole sermon is connected, although there are different blocks that we can see. And so, in Matthew chapter 6, starting in verse 19, Jesus is speaking and he says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. For if your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money." This is the word of the Lord. Elsewhere, later in Matthew, Jesus also speaks of the kingdom of heaven, and he describes it like a treasure that is hidden in a field. And when a man comes along and discovers it in a field, he's filled with excitement and he goes out and he sells everything that he has to go and buy the field and inherit that treasure that was within it. And then he also goes on and he says that the kingdom of heaven is like a precious pearl that a man finds at a market being sold. And he's so filled with excitement and joy that he runs home and he sells all his possessions so that he can go and buy that treasure pearl for himself. You know, because sometimes in life we find things that we desperately desire, things that we deeply need. And yet we cannot afford it without sacrifice. For my family, I mean, I don't know if you've seen the market lately. I know some of you have seen the market about how you need diligence and sacrifice to be able to buy a house these days, right? There are some things that you need to sacrifice for. And I had worked for it. I mean, I was thinking about that. I'm the kind of person, I was thinking about that back in high school. I was homeschooled, so maybe that was part of it. But I was thinking about it and saving and working money, not buying things, and building up my credit all the way back then. And then in university, trying to work through and get scholarship and study hard, and all for the sake of one day getting that big purchase. And also not being in debt in student loans is also a good goal too. But it took work and sacrifice. And I know many other people have a far greater sacrifice that had to be made for similar results. That's just one example, though, of home buying, where it requires a mix of privilege for sure, provision, and sacrifice. In the same way that this man who comes across the treasure in the field, or the one who finds this pearl in the market, they had to give up everything else first to find that treasure. Because these people that Jesus speaks of, they are people who knew what their treasure was. But it begs the question, what about the person who prefers and values their stuff over that treasure in the field or that pearl? I mean, myself personally, I could say he sold everything for For a pearl? I don't know if that's what I would sell everything for. I might like my stuff more. Now, maybe we need to change the analogy and I'd say, oh, I get it now. A treasure in a field, that sounds more up my alley than a pearl. But we're all shown different things. What if you preferred your stuff over your treasure? What if you didn't sell everything that you had to buy this treasure, which is the kingdom of heaven? Yeah, because we're constantly being marketed to. That's what marketing is. It's in a world filled with goods and services to buy. You can't have it all. Marketing is saying, of all the things, what I have is what you need. That's what marketing is all about. Convincing you that what you need, what you treasure, is what they have. So whether it's a mix of cars or beauty products, fast food, what kind of commercials do we see all the time? All pretty well saying, this is what will complete you. All bidding for our attention and our wallets. And so at the same time, though, marketing is such a prominent part of the world because you need to be convinced. You need to value what they are selling. Because if you don't value something, you will not invest into it. You must value it first. We choose, and we have to choose, how we spend our time and our money. We never end up with more than what we want. You don't accidentally go out and buy a jet ski. You never happen to have that extra cash and, oh, look at that, I have one now. That doesn't happen by accident. If you are, take me out for dinner later. I'd love to be your friend. You only get the jet ski if you treasure it and you make sacrifices for it. And the jet ski can be replaced with any other number of things. If you treasure it, you will sacrifice for it. And so today, the question that must be asked is, what is your treasure? Where does your treasure lie? Because each one of us here in this room today, we are all treasure hunters. Every single one of us. Maybe it's not a box in a field. Maybe it's not a pearl in a market. Maybe it's not a jet ski. But whatever it is, we all treasure something above all else. And we will sacrifice in its name, for its cause. And the question that is asked here, that Jesus is asking, is, will you treasure the things of earth or the things of God? I think this would be a perfect Sunday for a second offering, but I didn't put it in for the schedule. See, but verse 21 is key, where Jesus says, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. All of your energy, all of your investment, all your sacrifices go towards your treasures. Now Jesus, he has just been talking about pride. About building up your own image, your ego, and earning the approval and favor and blessings of other people and of God, trying to make your own way. And now Jesus is pivoting, and yet they're fairly well close together, talking about your money, your resources, the things you treasure on earth. And so often money is pride's greatest companion. Pride and money are so often together. You heard it said, time is money, or perhaps you've heard it said, money is power. They come alongside one another. With an abundance of money, your power grows. That's just the way things are in this world. And as your power grows with your money, your dependence on others becomes less and less. And so you begin to think less and less of God as well. So often this is the story. But what about the lack of money? That can also leave you feeling insignificant or perhaps desperate. And you lose sight of the provision that God has given you. Whether you have an abundance of money or you're worried about the lack of money, so often money will turn your eyes away from God and towards yourself. So easily, whether you think too highly of yourself or too lowly of yourself, both are the symptoms of pride, and money can lead you in both directions. And so Jesus is warning his listeners to not rely and to treasure the things of earth. Don't rely on those treasures that we store for ourselves here, whether that's money or property, assets, whether it's the pleasures of life, whether you're building up your treasure of enjoyment, food, clothes, travel, air miles. Jesus says these are the things where moths and vermin destroy, where thieves would break in and steal. It's interesting, as I read this passage, I'm reminded Jesus is essentially summarizing the wisdom book of Ecclesiastes that says everything is meaningless because at the end of the day we all die and we don't get to keep any of it anyway. And how often do we work hard and then someone else gets to enjoy the benefits of it? Whether that's through inheritance or you pitch an idea and someone else takes the credit and they get all the glory. And how often do the treasures we work for end up falling short? And so Jesus says the same thing here as well. I hope you're encouraged this morning. Jesus says none of it's going to last. No matter how much we collect, how much that collection turns into a pile and then a hoard, no matter how much stuff we gather, it will evaporate to the endless march of time. Just wait long enough and it will all disappear. Things will break down. Whether you use it or not, I remember my grandmother, she had a car some time ago, and she started to drive it less and less and less, and eventually it started having problems, and the mechanic told us, well, actually, it's not because it's being driven too much, it's because it's not being driven enough. Oh, I've never realized I had to drive it to keep it going. If a ship, great large ship, isn't in the water being used, it will start to break down because it's built for the water. There are things that you can have, and even if you don't use it, it will break down. Of course, there are some people where if they use something, it's going to break down pretty quick too. Food, clothes, well, moths are great at those. Food will rot or it'll be eaten. Those are the options you have. Modern preservatives slow that a little bit down, but it's either going to rot or it will be used up. Everything we have will disappear. Even the experiences, the travel, your memories of it will dull. Everything will slip away. If that doesn't make it worse, I've found also that building up these treasures on earth is a great way to invite comparison into your life. Well, I got to travel here. Where did you travel? I've always wanted to go there. Well, now my trip down to Nova Scotia is not as exciting as the Bahamas. I guess I'm not as happy as I thought I was. And as you build up as your treasures the things of earth, comparison will steal any joy from anything you were excited about. And you'll never be content again with comparison in your life. And so, no matter how accomplished you become, there's always someone else better at something. Or they have something that you don't. You'll always be left wanting more as you compare yourself. And as Jesus says, he speaks of it like the light within you, the eyes that you have will not open the door to light, but instead to darkness. The things you see as you look around and compare, if you're focused on things here and now on earth, you will be left in darkness. And even the darkness within you will become even darker if the light is like darkness. Eyes being the windows of the soul. And so, Jesus says, if your eyes are so focused on the treasures of earth and they cause darkness within you, set your eyes on the things of heaven. Set your eyes on things that cannot rot or be stolen or destroyed. Do not look to the things of earth. Don't build your life on that. But the hope that Jesus says is to turn your eyes and store up the treasures in heaven. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy, where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Now, this is not a kind of offshore account type situation that Jesus is giving here. He's not saying it's the same treasures, but in a different way. No, he's challenging you to ask yourself, where do you put your trust? Do you live your life trusting in yourself or trusting in God? Next week digs a little bit deeper as Jesus confronts our worry and our anxiety, as we try to focus all on ourselves and what we can do. But today we're looking a little bit more at trust and loyalty, the treasure that you will sacrifice for. For the one who is worthy of it all. I think as I read this, that the greatest difference between storing up treasures on earth versus the treasures in heaven is perspective. Perspective. How far is your perspective? With a short perspective, we're always going to focus on those immediate needs or desires, our impulses, what we want to do, the short-term goals, the things that are frankly, more easily attainable. When we have a short-term perspective, it makes sense to live for the pleasure of today if we think we might die tomorrow. Why would we be so worried and focused? I've heard stories of people as we look through the different stages of life. As a young person, you think you're invincible. And perhaps you get a bit older and you realize, I need to prepare for the future. I need to study and work hard and get a good job and then build my way up the career ladder and then I'll be in a place where I'm happy. And as you get older and older, you start to look back more and less to the future. You get to the point where perhaps someone asks you, what's your 5-year plan? What's your 10-year plan? And everyone in high school is perhaps anxious about it, but they're still thinking, well, I'm not sure. Then you get older and older, more and more people say, I know where I'll be in 10 years. I'm not too worried about that, or I'm very worried about that. Your perspective starts to shift, but if you have a long-term perspective, the way you live, the treasures you have are different than when you have a short perspective. There was a study of this done at Stanford back in the 60s and 70s. The marshmallow experiment, if you've heard about it. What happens is they took some children, they put them in a room, and they hand them this marshmallow treat, and they tell them, you can eat this whenever you want. This beautiful marshmallow treat, it's yours. But if you wait for 15 minutes, then we'll give you a second one. 2 for the price of 1, and this is an experiment, so it's free for you anyway. You can eat it whenever you want, but if you can wait, you'll have a greater reward. Now, for some of those children, 15 minutes was eternity, far too long. They couldn't comprehend eternity, and so they eat it right then and there. There were some who ate it before the instructions were even finished. But then there were those who had a further perspective, who would look ahead, who would look to eternity. I'm sure none of them enjoyed waiting for that long. And yet, They had their eyes focused on a further, greater goal, and then they would end up with a greater reward. A short-term sacrifice for a long-term goal. And see, Jesus is encouraging us here, his listeners, to keep the long-term perspective of eternity during our short-term time of earth. Because friends, even if we were to live 50, 70, 80, 100, 120 years on this earth, it is a blip in the scope of eternity. It is not even 15 minutes. The Apostle Paul also speaks of this to the Colossians, telling them to focus their mind on heavenly things. Not just pretend, just ignore all the things around you. You can't ignore the things around you, but you can focus your attention on something specific. You'll always be marketed to, but do you know what your true treasure is? Are you focused on heavenly things instead of these earthly things? Do you have eternity in mind to remember what's truly valuable? But the obvious question is, why not have both? After all, even in this experiment, you get two. It's not a second, bigger one that you get instead of the first. No, you get both. Why not have it both ways? This is the question so many people ask. After all, the argument said, money is not a sin. Money itself isn't bad. Travel, experience, all of these things, they're not inherently evil. They're not a sin. It's the love of money that is sinful. And that's true. There's nothing inherently evil or wrong with your provision or privilege, but how desperately do you seek those earthly treasures? How do you treat the treasures you have already been entrusted with? Do they consume your mind and your heart? Whether you've been given privilege or if you've sought it out and worked hard for it yourself. Jesus spoke of the one who would sell all that they had so that they would have the treasure which is like the kingdom of God. I won't say that everyone has to get rid of everything they have. Perhaps you have been very privileged. And if that is the case, how do you use it for the sake of these kingdom treasures? Because as Jesus says here, where your treasure is, your heart will be also. And Jesus says, no one can serve two masters. Why not have it both ways? Because you will always end up preferring one master over the other. When you make a sacrifice, it will be for one master over another. What happens when you have two treasures that are conflicting with one another? When your love for money stands against your obedience to God, when you're put in a position where perhaps you can get rich through dishonesty. Perhaps you'll abandon your Sabbath rest and you'll work an extra day. Maybe you'll change how you speak or behave depending on the people around you. What do you do when your masters conflict with one another? You cannot love and serve both God and money. This is the same issue that the rich young ruler had when he first came to Jesus. He came to Jesus and asked, "What must I do to be saved?" And what does Jesus say? He says, well, follow the commands. Which commands? And Jesus starts to go through the 10 commandments. He hits some of the big ones on the list. Don't murder, good place to start. Don't steal, don't lie, don't commit adultery. And the man says, I've done it all. When of course the commandments, the law is really supposed to show you that I can't do it by myself. But this man says, I have done everything right. And that's when he reveals that he's made a grave mistake. Because the very first of the 10 Commandments says, "Have no other gods before me." And what is this man called? Not a name, but the rich young ruler. That was his identity. And when Jesus told the man to sell all that you have, give it to those in need, and follow me, he says, get rid of your wealth. And that was when the man's heart was revealed. He went away sad because he refused to give up his true love, his treasure. His wealth had made him comfortable. He grew to depend on it. And it took the place of God as his treasure. He had failed the very first of those commands, yet he thought he had it all together. And the tragic part of it is that we all face that temptation to build up the treasures on earth. Of course we do. That marshmallow is sitting in our hands right in front of us. We have the temptation to build up our treasures on earth, to lose sight of the perspective of the eternity because of the perspective of short-sightedness. I once heard it put this way, and I've really appreciated it. That there are some people who dedicate their lives to pad up their resume instead of padding up their eulogy. What's said when it's all gone? Some people will be so focused at building up their accomplishments, what they can say to people to impress them. But at the end of your life, it doesn't matter what you made for your company or what your stocks looked like. It doesn't matter what your portfolio is when you're dead. People won't remember that when they say, "Oh, what was your great-grandfather like?" "Oh, well, he was an incredible businessman. He just did great. He had so many boats." No, they'll tell you who they were, your character, your integrity, the joy that you had. So often I hear people say, "Oh, that person was just so filled with peace." People will remember you for your character, your integrity, your joy, the fruits of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience. These are the things that people will speak of. These are the treasures of heaven. These are the things that matter, the things that remain even when we are gone from this earth. And so Jesus says, keep your eyes fixed on eternity, on the kingdom of heaven and on life with the Father. Don't let your eyes wander or grow dim to the wonder of God. Keep your eyes fixed on what is truly valuable. Let's pray.